For much of the 2023 Formula 1 season, Fernando Alonso and Aston Martin have been the closest challengers to the Red Bull dominance. This is the third season for Aston Martin since their return to the sport as a constructor, but this is a team with a storied history which began over 30 years ago when Eddie Jordan decided to take the gamble to join Formula 1 for the 1991 season. This is a brief history of Formula 1.
3 lines, 4 lines, 5 laps. Pause. Go, go, go.
For the roots of this famous team, we have to go back a decade even earlier to when moderately successful Irish Formula Atlantic racer Eddie Jordan decided his F1 dreams weren't going to happen from within the cockpit, so he gave team ownership a try. Eddie Jordan Racing was formed and the little team began to see success in Formula 3 and then Formula 3000 during the decade. The team ran several young talents who would eventually go on to race and even win in Formula 1. Their first milestone season came in 1983 as a young Martin Brundle ran Ayrton Senna mightily close to the British F3 Championship in an EJR car. The step up to Formula 3000 eventually came good, with Johnny Herbert taking the team's first victory at that level in the 1988 season, before John Alesi took the title the following year. More future F1 winners in Eddie Irvine and Heinz-Harald Frentzen raced for the team in 1990, and future world champion Damon Hill was in a seat for the 91 season, but by then, the Formula 1 dream for Jordan Grand Prix had been reached. Jordan Grand Prix was formed and based out of Silverstone, and there the 191 car was a giant killer in the team's debut season. Decked out in its glorious 7-Up sponsored paint scheme and driven by journeyman veterans Andrea de Cesaris and Bertrand Gachot, Jordan scored points in their 5th race in Canada. Later on in the season, after Gachot was jailed after an altercation with a taxi driver, this young German driver was handed a race seat in exchange for a big bag of money from Mercedes-Benz. Michael Schumacher performed so well at his only race weekend at Spa that 2 weeks later he was racing for Benetton. De Cesaris was also running an incredible second for much of that race before reliability issues struck. The team took a shock but well-deserved 5th place in the championship on debut, but then struggled over the next couple of years, and it wasn't until 1994 until the team took another step forward and looked as remotely competitive as 1991. Rubens Barrichello scoring the team's first podium at the Pacific Grand Prix early in the season, and then taking the team's first pole position back in Belgium on a drying Spa circuit. They were back in 5th place in the championship with stability from the driver partnership of Barrichello and former F3000 driver Eddie Irvine. Things were looking good. A double podium came a year later in Montreal, and 1995 was ultimately very similar to 94. But big changes came in 1996 with the arrival of title sponsors Benson and Hedges, who would turn the cars gold and then yellow and stay with the team for much of the next 10 seasons. Jordan continued to promote young drivers with Giancarlo Fisichella and Ralf Schumacher racing for them in 1997, but it was the introduction of 1996 world champion Damon Hill who proved the catalyst for their first ever race victory. Extreme weather and a chaotic race saw Hill and Schumacher line astern and take a 1-2 for the team, with former F3000 champion Alesi also on the podium in a fantastic day for Eddie Jordan. Schumacher was replaced for 1999 by another Formula F3000 driver in Frentzen, who took wins in the wet at Manicourt and then again at Monza to drive the team to 3rd place in both championships and even mount an outside threat for the driver's title. But this was the peak of the team as performances and then funding eventually fell by the wayside. A small but momentary blip came with their final race victory in bizarre circumstances at the 2003 Brazilian Grand Prix, with Giancarlo Fisichella back in the team and being awarded victory on countback after a red flag brought the race to a premature end. By 2004 the team was up for sale, with Russian-Canadian businessman Alex Schneider taking over the team in 2005 in a deal reported at $60 million. They ran for one final season as Jordan before being rebranded as Midland F1 Racing for the 2006 season. Performance on track was poor at best, and the team was sold again before the end of the year, with Dutch Spyker Cars Group taking over the team for the final 3 races for a reported $106 million. Things didn't really improve on track for Spyker F1, aside from a brief flourish from Markus Winkelhock at the Nürburgring in his only F1 race. Spyker barely lasted through the 2007 season, and the team was sold once again. This time it was Indian businessman Vijay Mallya who stumped up a reported $81 million, and the Silverstone outfit became Force India for 2008. Fisichella returned to the team for his 3rd stint, but performances didn't really improve until new regulations came in 2009. It was there that Force India began gaining the reputation of underdogs who could fight for solid points given the opportunity. Fisichella grabbing their first podium with 2nd place at Spa before leaving for Ferrari. The team continued to perform well, but it wasn't until the arrival of Nico Hülkenberg and Sergio Perez, separately and then as a duo, that the team really became the best of the midfield once again. Perez grabbed podium after podium, including one at Bahrain in 2014, putting up another 3 over the next few seasons, with Hülkenberg famously being very good unless a podium chance beckoned. 2017 saw a new title sponsor and a striking pink livery, along with Esteban Ocon joining Perez at the helm. On-track performances continued to be impressive, but off-track things weren't going very well, and the team eventually went into administration by 2018. Halfway through the year, the team were ultimately rescued by Lawrence Stroll, an investor in the Williams team and father of their driver, Lance Stroll. The newly named Racing Point team continued where Force India left off, and unsurprisingly the younger Stroll found himself in a race seat for the following year. Both drivers got podiums in 2020, but it was the Sakhir Grand Prix at the end of the year which saw the team's finest moment, as Perez came from last to win the team's first and only race in a career-defining performance, made even sweeter by Stroll taking third for the double podium. During that year, Lawrence Stroll brought a 16.5% stake in Aston Martin, and so for the 2021 season, the former Jordan team became Aston Martin F1 and signed 4-time world champion Sebastian Vettel to partner the boss's sub. Vettel took the team's first podium at Baku in 2021, and the team took back-to-back 7th place finishes in the Constructors' Championships. But with Vettel retiring for 2023, he was being replaced by Fernando Alonso, who has since scored 7 podiums at the time of this recording, and this video has now gone full circle. If you've enjoyed this brief look back at the history of the Aston Martin F1 team, please consider subscribing to the channel and look out for more F1 content coming soon.
And I've got to stop because I've got a lump in my throat.